1996 in comics, man. You know, a lot of stuff was going on back then. A lot of stuff. Even outside of comics, man. Gene Kelly died. George Burns turned 100. Arnold Schwarzenegger was announced as Mr. Freeze from the new Batman movie that's coming out. Sandman was closing its eyes, ending. This little upstart book called Preacher was getting ready to finish its first year run, and it caught a lot of attention. Kingdom Come was around the corner. Everybody was starting to get excited about it. A lot of things going on. Poor Marvel was getting ready for an onslaught and getting ready for Heroes Reborn. You know, handing over some of their books to Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld. We all know how that went. And the comic book industry at the time was a bubble that was about to pop. It was in trouble. Now us as comic book fans and stuff, this is right on the verge of the internet coming into play and everything like that. We didn't know it, because at this time a lot of things led up to it, but the biggest mover at the time was Image Comics from in '92, when they had formed and started putting out their books, and you had this big burst of everybody, just all these companies coming up to be the next Image, and you know, indie creators and stuff, and everybody getting up. And if a comic book shop had actually put out every book that was available throughout the '90s, even with their gimmick covers and multiple covers and just everything that was out there and stuff, it would have been over 800 books a month. Now, right before Image had started in the the '90s, they had a couple books set records where they sold 1 million a month. You know, that's thanks to Jim Lee and others who felt like they weren't getting a big chunk of the change, or they didn't like having zero rights as creators, pretty much, for various things. So all this led up to DC and Marvel getting hurt. Okay, DC was actually considered the house of ideas there for a few years, even though they were number 2 in sales. It was documented in many things where they were considered the new house of ideas. At DC, this was no secret back then. They had done stuff like the death of Superman, Nightfall, Batman, 0 Hour, Mark Waid bringing up the Flash and everything like that, Peter David rejuvenating Aquaman, replacing Hal Jordan with Kyle Rayner as Green Lantern, finding out that Green Arrow had a son. Just all these storylines were going on, and they were working. They had Starman by James Robinson and stuff. All of a sudden, their Vertigo books were just highly acclaimed. They had Neil Gaiman, At Marvel, where they lost that big sweep of creators there, and they had an attitude of, well, we'll just stick Spider-Man on a book. No matter what we do, though, people will buy it because it's Spider-Man, and that kind of attitude. It's almost like there was this generation gap now, all of a sudden, and which is ironic because Marvel was over 30 and stuff, and they say don't trust anybody over 30. This is coming from a man about to turn 41. And just a lot of things were happening. And all of a sudden it was like Marvel, to me, was like that dad from Father's Knows Best trying to talk to the Brady kids in the late 60s and early 70s and using words like groovy and far out. And that's how Marvel felt. And I'm not going to mention the guy's name because he still draws comics and still has fans. But Marvel started trying to change some of their titles and kind of update and make them hip and all this stuff, and they redid the entire Avengers line with new redesigns and god awful costumes. I mean, my God, they turned the Wasp into some kind of mutated bug lady, and oh my God, the costume that Thor had was just awful. But I digress. But nobody even remembers that event. I think it was called, I can't remember if it was called The Gathering or what it was called. But nobody remembers it. Nobody talks about it. It's like it never happened. And Marvel was, to me, kind of reaping what they had sowed, because they had bought up Malibu. Malibu had started Image. Image moved away from Malibu, and Malibu Comics started the Ultraverse, and it started gaining sales. And Marvel came in and bought that up and just completely got rid of it. And then they sued Defiant Comics. They had a book called Warriors of Plasm. I think it was called Plasm originally, and they had to change it to Warriors of Plasm. And DC decided to make a book called Plasmer, and they decided to take it to court. And even though that Defiant Comics won that legal battle, Marvel had drained all of Defiant's resources in the legal battle. They had to close up shop. not because their books were bad, not because sales were bad. They just used up all their money fighting Marvel. So all of a sudden now Marvel is the one in trouble, and that's the whole deal. That's what I'm getting at here. This came out. This is all the CEOs and higher ups and stuff. This isn't the guys that were making the comics, you know. But I think the two editors on this were Mike Carlin from DC and Mark Gruenwald from the great Mark Gruenwald from Marvel. And yeah, it was Mike Carlin and them. And what they gave us is that this was just so great for the fans, and everybody was all excited, and it was finally happening. Things that people were waiting on years and stuff. We got the ultimate stunt. We got the DC versus Marvel, and it was going to be interactive, man. As fans, we would get to vote on who wins on certain characters and stuff. And they brought in two greats, man. It was Peter David and Ron Mars. And DC put out two of these books, and Marvel put out two of these books, and we finally got to see everything. And then they brought in Dan Jurgens for the art, and some other guy, Castellini, never heard of him and stuff like that, to come in for the art. And this thing was kind of cool to see. It was kind of cool to see. It was very 90s, very 90s. And with our first book, we get Exposition. We open up to Spider-Man. And this thing was great. It was selling out, and they were making a big deal about it having a $3.95 price tag. Who in the hell is going to buy a book for $3.95? This was their attitude. This was something they were really worried about. And now we're in the world of $2.99, $3.99, $7, $9 books. You know. So the first thing we get is we get Spider-Man, Ben Reilly. We get our great big DC Marvel universe, and we're not even really getting our characters that we want to see flying around. And he can notice that something seems a little different with the New York skyline, or there's some light or something like that. And this hobo, this homeless guy, is sitting there trying to hold together a cardboard box where all this light is shining out of, and this guy named Axel is watching him, like, what's going on here? And Spider-Man gets to meet the Joker, and they have a little talk and stuff. Ben Reilly's Spider-Man. So things start happening there. Just to get on the story, you can get it and read it and stuff, but all of a sudden, you know, the Juggernaut and the X-Men are fighting. The Juggernaut just ups and disappears. And next thing you know, he's on the Daily Planet trying to figure out where he's at, and there he is in front of Superman. Superman's wanting some answers. You look like you're in the wrong place, mister. Meanwhile, the cardboard box keeps the light shining, and it gets worse and worse, and the hobo's sitting there trying to figure out, what do I do here? And that goes on and on, man. We have characters that disappearing and reappearing in different worlds. You know, Superboy, Lobo, everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. And then we start to get to see what's going on. Then there's Thor in his redesigned costume. All these other people start getting the glow about him. They disappear. Where's everybody going? Why are these people popping up? And then we finally start seeing what happens, man. We open up with Batman telling somebody to let go of Robin. They're in the Batcave, and Bullseye has a hold of Robin. And he's just as shocked. Tell me where I'm at, or I'm going to cut this kid's face. And they get a little taste of it, man. Batman throws a batarang at him after Robin chokes him in the throat. He catches the batarang, throws it right back, but he can't believe that he missed Batman. He never misses. And then you start to find out that somebody has bought the Daily Planet out of the blue. Perry White is out, and J. Jonah Jameson is running the Daily Planet. You know, so you go on through there, and that's what we'll kind of see. But one of the stronger storylines that kind of carries over is when Tim Drake Robin meets Jubilee of, what were they, Generation X back then? Generation Next? I don't know. Some book that's gone. And she loves his style. And all of a sudden, all these pictures are coming in, man, and you get to see these team-ups that you never thought you'd see. Captain America, not team-up, fights. You know, Captain America fighting Bane, Riddler versus Daredevil, you know, Hobgoblin versus Green Lantern, Absorbing Man versus Steel, you know, what was going on back then. Fantastic Four versus two members of Justice League. And then you had to know your comics and stuff. There's Doctor Strange and Starman meeting, but that's because Tony Harris designed Starman and was redesigning Dr. Fate a little bit later, or around this time or something. But, you know, I'm harking on Marvel a little bit because they kind of lost the game here. We get this big DC Marvel crossover we've always wanted. I mean, who wasn't a kid sitting on the bus with their friends saying Superman can beat up the Hulk, who's stronger, who can do this, and everything like that. And we get the time where Marvel was actually kind of at its lowest, man. You've got Namor and Punisher are carrying ponytails. Wolverine does not have his adamantium. Okay, he's actually more of a bestial creature when this is going on, and it's bone. You know, Magneto pulled his adamantium out. We didn't even have Peter Parker's Spider-Man, even though he kind of floats around here and there. We had Ben Reilly, the clone Spider-Man, supposedly, and stuff. And even in '96, that was the good year that they killed the Clone Saga. They finally listened to the fans and got rid of Ben Reilly and brought back Spider-Man. And you found out that all those years, 20 years of Spider-Man continuity was not tossed out. There was a fear that Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker, and Peter Parker had been the clone that survived from like Spider-Man 149. So you had, you know, quite a few dozen years there where your Spider-Man books weren't really Peter Parker. Marvel really tried this. Because their attitude is if we have Spider-Man and we put Spider-Man on that book, the people's going to buy it no matter what we do. So, you know, this was more or less exposition. You're building on the world. You see these people, you see all these characters popping up, and then you see the Spectre and the Living Tribunal. Spectre from DC, the agent of God. Living Tribunal, the one who oversees all the cosmic beings and the goings-on, that he's judge and jury and stuff like that. You see them kind of trying to keep things together, and then you see these two great big huge red and blue cosmic beings, and it turns out they're brothers. And Peter David and Ron Mars came up with something like at the Big Bang there was two shards of reality, and one is the one reality is DC and one was Marvel, and these two became aware of each other. And that little box in the alleyway is a doorway, and it always has somebody watching over it to make sure there's a balance. So we go on to number 2. Oh yeah. And you also, like I said, you get the vote. You know, there's a lot of information here. But here's the actual article where you get the vote, and they'll pop up in number 3. Alright, you have Batman versus Captain America. Okay, Hulk versus Superman. Superboy versus Spider-Man. Wolverine versus Lobo. Wonder Woman versus Storm. And when I saw that, the first thing I was like, I already knew who was going to win. Not who should win, but who was going to win. Because that turned it into a popularity contest. People were not going to step back and be objective and go by their comic book history and their common sense and be like, well, you know, he really wouldn't win, and I like her, but she really wouldn't win. And she wasn't the only one. The actual people who worked on the book had the same concerns, right? Here's a quote from Dan Jurgens in this Wizard magazine when this was going on. It says, Superman will and should win over the Hulk. Matter of factly, he says. Batman will win. Captain America should win. Wolverine will win. Lobo should win. Wonder Woman should win. Storm will win. You know, Superboy should win. Spider-Man will win. And we have to look at this from two standpoints: who I think will win and who I think should win. And those fighting words for some people, right? But it turned into a popularity contest, and to me that actually took away a little bit of the credibility. First, the story structure is set up where it's just a contest of champions instead of an actual Marvel versus DC kind of deal. And I think they're fighting for their universes. You know, these two universes are going to be fighting. But there was some comic book cliche kind of story, you know. But it's all in fun. It's all in fun. It's all in how you take it, right? I mean, look at that god-awful Thor costume, you know. This was just a very bad time for Marvel when this was going on. So, you know, we get some cool stuff. We end up getting to see more of the same a little bit, but the story is expanding. We get to see Wolverine versus Croc, and they go through there, and that's what you're kind of seeing things. And then you think you're going to get it, man. You finally see Thanos meet Darkseid, and they're going to go at it. And Darkseid thinks he's nothing but a knockoff. And in real life, we all know that there's no secret. Jim Starlin created Thanos, you know, and the shadow of Darkseid. You know, he made a Darkseid who was just in love with death. And there's little nods and hints and stuff that was going on. And, you know, Batman's observing the lizard, and the lizard had a god-awful... I mean, he's a whole different species of lizard compared to what he was. I mean, we're not just talking evolution here of the lizard. We're talking about he's not even the kind of lizard DNA he put himself, you know, just... Excuse me for using common sense and stuff. But, you know, people are starting to notice things, and we get more exposition explaining what's going on. And I could go through the book and just tell the whole thing like this and stuff. But you can go get it. But they continue, you know, having really cool things. A lot of running to the mouth of Darkseid and Thanos, and all these great moments you thought you would want to see. And you feel like they're trying to build up to something. And you start seeing Captain Marvel versus Shazam. And Namor versus Aquaman and everything like that. You're starting to get this thing. But as I was reading, I was like, okay, this is cool. You see Quicksilver versus Flash. To me, that's a wasted page. The Flash is going to take out Quicksilver. I mean, you start seeing these things where it's cool to see it, but they're getting rid of these stories and moving along the story, and you're getting like one page. I mean, there's not anything really else going on. But then you find out that somehow, even though he's in a whole new world, Wilson Fisk due to go buy the Daily Planet up just to do it. And you got Ben Riley, hitting up on Lois Lane and everything like that. And you see Wonder Woman pick up the Hammer of Thor. She's worthy. And that's going to lead up to a little scoreboard for you guys to know. Alright? Now, what had happened is in issue 3, we get to see these fights. And they're very awkward. This is the results of our voting. Okay? And you get to read the journal of Jubilee catching this all up and everything, and how she's starting to have feelings for Mr. Tim Drake, that Robin. And I'm not going to spoil it. I mean, this may be something you want to get, but you see some showdown stuff, but there's some of the stuff you're just eye-rolling. Even when you try to remember that this is for fun and stuff like that, there's just some stuff you can tell the writers just really didn't know how to handle because of the voting. I mean, the Wolverine versus Lobo. Let me explain Lobo. Wolverine has claws. Lobo travels, he fights cosmic beings. He fights Superman. He's super tough because he can travel, unaided in space and stuff on his bike and stuff. I mean, he's a very tough guy. And Wolverine, has those bone claws, which number one shouldn't be, even if he had, he shouldn't be able to cut him. If he had his adamantium, yeah, we're talking geek now, he'd be able to cut Lobo. But the deal with Lobo is that for every drop of blood that gets dropped out of him, it grows another Lobo. So having Wolverine versus Lobo is like one of the worst things you can do. So basically, they're in a bar in space. They jump in each other's faces. They're taking a few swings at each other. And the writers are not sure how to go with the vote to where Wolverine wins, so they stick him behind a bar. You don't actually see the fight, and Wolverine comes up puffing on his cigar. Yeah, and that's kind of how the rest of them go. This was a big disappointment. Number 3, all because of the votes. Can we blame Marvel and DC on this one? No, we can blame the fans. Turn it into a high school popularity contest. Alright? But that led to an amalgamation. And I'm going to do the amalgamation video later in this. But what happened is due to something in the book, the two Marvel universes, the Marvel universe and the DC universe, end up getting merged into one. And they came out with a series of, for 1 month, Amalgam comics, which was, let me see if I have one here. Yeah, we ended up getting Amalgam comics. And what was cool about these Amalgam comics is that this is not only DC and Marvel merged, but they're saying there's a whole timeline here, like it's always been this way. So that's for another video. And there was quite a few of those one-shots. So anyway, the amalgamation ends, and our heroes get separated, and we pick up with the Amalgam universe in this one. So even though it's a mini-series from 3 to 4, you need to pick up all the one-shots. And we get a whole new character that turns out to be Access. And now he is co-owned by Marvel and DC, and he is to watch the cardboard box that separates these two universes because the original guy has died. He's burnt out. And now it's like, oh my God, we got to get these two worlds split. And you see the Living Tribunal, and you see the Spectre holding on for dear life. And all the Amalgam characters are floating around, and Axel's starting to, his name is Access now, are starting to try to fix things, And that's the whole plot of what's going on. And things get shattered. It's finally happening. They're separating the two universes again like they're supposed to be. And everybody's back. So, it's time, there's some cleanup. The heroes are kind of talking. Access is now going to be the Guardian. And we have the two brothers, the two separate universes, kind of fighting and clashing. Spectre and Living Tribunal are like, dear God, you have to stop. And basically they end up shaking hands after all this hell and stuff like that, watching these two cosmic beings having Darkseid wanting to know where the hell did Thanos run from, because those two were about to throw down and they wanted each other's throat. Darkseid was like, if you love death so much, I'll show you to her. But you know, after seeing the shared universes, the brothers kind of look at each other and they stare each other down. They reach out their hands and they shake hands and tell each other they did a good job. So you know, if you sit through that, not a lot of backstory to that, not a lot of substance. It was just kind of for fun. It was throw it out there. Let's get all these characters on the same page. Let's get this thing out. And it was a hit. It made money, even though that number 3 issue in the vote tainted the whole series. Peter David and Rod Mars did the best with what I think they had to do with. And, you know, I just kind of feel like if I was going, you know, I would love to talk about this work on its own for what it was. You know, it was great when it came out. It was some of the first books I ordered through a mail-in service to make sure I got them, including the Amalgam issues that spun out of them. This thing also went on to, I might talk about those later too, to do 2 spin-offs, 2 sequels, if you will. DC Marvel All Access, which brought back some of the Amalgam comics. Again, check out my amalgamation video, because this is a lot of information to put in there. But, you know, this was a little bit more low-key, a little bit more centered. Rod Mars came in and wrote it himself. Jackson Geist came in and did the art, and this one flowed more. Okay, where DC versus Marvel had the art flipping between Dan Jurgens and the Castellina guy. This one has one artist, so it flows much better. And it picks up little tidbits from DC versus Marvel, and it kind of expands on them. This one's just a much better structured story. This one is much better. You know, that's Batman at the Sanctarium of Doctor Strange. It's all because of love, because Tim and Jubilee missed each other and they wanted to see each other. And we got more Amalgam comics that really started messing up the balance. And then something I didn't even finish getting, if it's here, is, yeah, here it is. Oh no. It's here. It had a 3rd miniseries called All Access, which is written by Carl Kessel, and it kind of played more with time. That is amazing. I have not moved from this spot, and the books have disappeared. Yeah, Unlimited Access was the 2nd one. And this one played more with time travel, man. It crossed over Days of Future Past with the Legion. You got to see the Silver Age X-Men fight the Silver Age Justice League. You know, a little bit more subdued. They didn't really put a whole lot into these. I've got number 2 and 3, and it was a 4-issue miniseries. Did not lead to any more Amalgam spin-offs there. So I think I'm going to leave it there. It's almost a 20-minute video, and all I did was really show pages of the comic, because there's really not that much history behind it, how it all happened. Basically, it was for money. 2 editors that were great guys came in, did what they could. They got this thing out, charged a bundle for it at the time, made their money. And while this was going on, Marvel ended up laying off over 250 people and a bunch of editors, and shut down the 2099 line of their comics in the 90s. A few years later, they would not very much longer. They would maybe 2 years later they would file for. I'm not going to say exactly what year it was, but they just a little bit later they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. DC ended up buying off Wildstorm and bringing them in and stuff like that. So Marvel was about to go out, and this was like one of their last stunts to save the company, which, you know, obviously didn't work. So there you go, DC versus Marvel. Hang on for the Amalgam comics coming soon.